Welcome to Struggledork version 3, lesson 2. And this week we're going to start to change a little bit of what we've been doing around our communication. In the beginning, when I started to develop business communication, I developed a formula which I'll go into in the next video, but the formula fundamentally is words, numbers, symbols, focus. And in this beginning of Struggledork, we're going to move to symbols. And symbols really are pictures, colors, formula, just a very different way of communicating. So I'm wanting to demonstrate this different way of communicating in what I'm doing now. So I'm now teaching myself Camtasia Studio, and I'm about to go through and explain my thoughts in pictures, words, and symbols, and really get people to, or interested people in building systems and processes, really to understand the process itself. So I want to start by saying, if you see in the very center of this picture, I've got italics, minus, systems, forward stroke, process, positive, italic equals 1. And really what I'm saying is, uh, if you're going to think about a system and a process, you actually have to have 4 points, and you have to containerize those points. So the two italics marks, the black and the red, are the boundary of the thought. And what the thought is negative or positive. Systems include both. And systems always have a betweenness, which is a forward slash blue, and then a process. So everything we do, we talk about system, 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 and it drives me nuts because the system is already there. Process is what you do around a system. So it's all the activities you have, all the stuff that's moving around a system. So in my view, if you're going to design a business, you actually have to understand the system is already there, and your business is creating a new process or a new way of doing something to create an exchange of money. And so whenever I look at developing businesses, I already understand accounting's there, legal agreements are there, teaching and education methods are already there. People already understand marketing, branding, and selling. What the real important part of developing a new business is to understand that you're developing a system and a process around your business and how you do it and how you create exchange. It's not how somebody else does it. And every single business really has to develop their own way of doing something, their own process. So I always say systems and processes equal 1. And to me, it doesn't matter whether it's negative or positive, they both occur in system. So some days, and usually the negative is already there and the positive is what you want to put there. And those are things that you'll learn over time. So in the beginning, I believe in this thing called God. And I don't mean the religious God, I mean the great original design. And what great equals in the way that I think is surpassing omni other. It's a preeminent, it's omni-preeminent. It means it's always there. I didn't create the marketplace. I didn't create the people in the marketplace. I didn't create the rules in the marketplace. All I do is work inside those. As an entrepreneur, I'm always looking at ways of working most efficiently with what's already there. So in a great original design, you have to understand that original is the earliest form of something from which copies may be made. So all kinds of businesses are out there, and we can talk about fast food, and we can say, how did fast food start? But really what you see is more and more companies in the food business still copying the same old thing. It's like it doesn't matter whether it's chicken, beef, vegetarian, they always have a drink, they always have some level of food. There's always the same thing going on, the process that they go through is what tends to be more unique than the actual system. And there are things about the system that are really quite important that change. And then when you look at the D, it's design, the creation of something. And so whenever I'm looking at a business, I'm really saying, what is it I want to design? And because I already know that most of everything I need to know is already there. And my question is, what am I doing with it? How am I redesigning it? What am I going to do? What's John Struggledork going to do around running his business? And for the last 5 years, I've traveled the world and I've looked at businesses in country after country after country. Essentially, the business is the same in that you have to keep account of something, you have agreements and terms and conditions, you have to educate somebody else on how to do it. And so we spend our time doing that as business owners. And good business owners own systems and processes, and they create capital wealth from their systems and their process. And so when I talk about design, I talk about design and how it evolves, or a design evolution. And what I realize is that whenever you're designing something, the very first thing you have to describe is the space. And I'm a student of this guy by the name of R. Buckminster Fuller, and I've studied a book called Synergetics, the Geometry of Thought, for the last 22 years. And what the book and countless videos and countless hours of watching Fuller has said to me, you've always got to start with the macro. And in all cases, the macro is the space. And when you're developing a space, what's really important to understand, all business has to work inside a space first. It doesn't really matter whether it's the space of your family, community, country, or the biosphere. You're always inside a space, and each one of those spaces determines your design. And Fuller says you always start with macro. And what he means by that is you cannot get out of universe. So you always start with universe. And then he goes on to say universe is not a system. Universe is not a shape. Universe is a scenario. You're always in universe. When you're working in a business, it is a scenario of scenarios. You've got employees, you've got people that sell to you, people you sell to them, you got money exchanging, you have margins, you have, whether you add value, whether or not you're really out there making a profit, and whether it all can repeat. And so what happens is that if you don't define the boundaries of that, it's really hard to manage and calibrate. And so what I do is, and calibration is knowing that you can do things over and over again and get better and better. Because business is really about cost. It's not essentially about price, it's about cost. Can you reduce your cost while maintaining your price? And again, that's something that I've written about for several years now, and I'm sure that people are confused about it. Most of the confusion is around the words that are used. But for me, cost is the space first, the energy next, what matter or what materials are you going to use, the time that it takes, and ultimately, or not ultimately, finally, the money. How much money is exchanged? And if you're not considering that as a cost, then you'll find business really difficult, because the universe and the marketplace are about cost. They're not about price. Price is what you charge somebody, and you hope to get a return in a margin to a profit. And we'll go into more and more of that. In the beginning, in the first Struggledork that I put out 2 weeks ago, I coined this idea, the empathic capitalist. I got that concept from an author by the name of Jeremy Rifkin, and he's talking about the empathic civilization. And it really got me to thinking that we should be thinking in capitalism, we should be thinking about the empathic capitalist. I love capitalism. I understand capitalism, and I think I view it in a little bit different way than a lot of people do. And so when I'm talking about the empathic capitalist, I'm talking about somebody who builds wealth through developing capital and has flow and intends no harm to anyone else. It's a transaction where all parties do well. And that to me, as we go over time, we'll get into the empathic capitalist. And again, last week we started talking about, or I started demonstrating in a comic book. And by the way, when you look at these pictures in this comic book that I created, or this comic page that I created, it's an actual training event or education event that I conducted in Mexico. These are real people. This is a real situation, and it really was what I was demonstrating was happening in the room because it was already there. The program was about talking about cooperation, moving to collaboration, looking at the distribution of it, and finally the leadership of it. And quite often you hear people say that, oh, I collaborate. Well, yeah, that's true. You can collaborate without cooperating. In my view, the first thing that you want to do is develop cooperation and agree that you're going to cooperate, and then you start to collaborate. As you start to collaborate, you start to say, okay, we have to distribute the idea of cooperation and collaboration, and it has to be distributed to your group. So if you look at this, you'll see that each person in the actual comic pictures were learning to cooperate, to collaborate, to distribute, and finally, somebody has to take leadership. And so the leader is essential in all business. Somebody has to say, this is going to be done. And if you understand that, you then realize that at different points in every business, somebody has to lead. And as they lead, what's really important to me is that they know they're the leader and they take accountability and responsibility for being the leader. They've already been in a room where they've cooperated, they've collaborated, and they distributed an idea of whatever it was. The thing that I think that people say, oh, well, we're all collaborating. Collaboration or consensus, in my view, doesn't mean something gets done. It just means that we've all worked together and we've had this thought. I do not believe you can run a business on consensus. You have to run a business with leaders, somebody that's willing to say, I'm going to do this, and then make sure this happens. And so for me, that's absolutely important in the overall of setting up a business system. Somebody actually has to take accountability, a responsibility, and make it happen. And in last week's or 2 weeks ago when we put this up, I always put this in here because I believe this to be very important. For me, in all environments, people teach people person to person. So we teach in groups or we educate in groups, and that's what's considered macro. And then at a micro level, we teach one to one. And so the most powerful force in the business is the peers in the business. Each person in the business affects the other person in the business. And if we don't acknowledge that, if we just keep saying to people, you will do this, you will do this, the world is far too smart for that today. So what we're looking at in the world today is people that are extremely well educated in terms of an ability to communicate. We have some very complex thoughts that go on, and people really do know how to deal with them. And treating your organization full of stupid people is not a good idea. And that's not what I do. I think that everybody has got to be heard, and I listen to everyone. That doesn't necessarily mean I follow everyone because ultimately there has to be leadership. And in my view, I have to be a leader, and that's my role in my organization. I design systems, I design processes, and I evaluate which way to go with them. And I do that because I ultimately know somebody has to have the strength of character to make sure something happens. And then you will see my 4 dots. And I'm always about connecting dots. I'm always about connecting things in terms of relationships. And as we go over time, you will see everything I do in 4s. And I do it in 4s because I want it to have shape. And we'll understand that further as we go more into the Struggledork version 3, where we start to describe what it is that's going on in my brain and related by my mind. If you can see in this picture here, you can see a triangle, right? And what Fuller says is a triangle is the minimum structure of the universe, not squares, not cubes, triangles. Everything that goes on starts and builds from a triangle. And then what he says is the minimum system has to be 4. So what you see is you'll see a point here, 1, 2, 3, and the 4th in this case is somebody thinking about what's going to happen. And what we're doing is we're looking at and we're saying, okay, me, John Struggledork, is going to design the system. And that system is going to be cooperative, it's going to be collaborative, it's going to be distributive, and it's going to be led. And so at some moment, somebody has to take the view that a leader has to appear. And as always, you can see little Johnny Struggledork here with his Superman suit on, saying we can get this done. Because at some moment in a business, there's optimism. And when you're an entrepreneur, that optimism is almost a sickness. And in my case, it's psychotic. And what it means by psychotic is I'm psychotically optimistic. And if you ask Judy, it drives people nuts, and it drives them nuts because I spend my life believing I can do things and getting things done. Usually I do get them done. And just for the record, if I think it's going to take 1 year, it usually takes 3 years. If I think it's going to take 3 years, it generally takes 10 years. Whatever time frame I put on something, I do it from a very optimistic filter. And my optimistic filter always sees me out in terms of the amount of time that it takes. The thing is, if you really see futures and you really want to be a futurist, you've got to hold what it is that you believe or you see in your mind. And I generally do. It takes me longer to get to where I want to go, and I always want to get to that moment. So, and in the beginning, what I'm explaining to you now is what I consider to be God. And God is great original design, but I don't spell it like the religious God. I spell it God dot O dot D dot. And really what that means is that there's 6 points to think about. It's not just God. It's great original design with all the connecting dots. And really what it is omni thing and omni there. And omni is the bigger way of saying all. It's all there and it's everything. And so if we look at that and we can just allow our minds to go there, we can design anything we choose, anything that we're capable of thinking through, we can get to a design point. And usually it's already there. All an entrepreneur does is create everything from nothing, because the nothingness is already there. And it seems like a paradox or a contradiction in terms, when in reality it is, and it actually is there. So, in the beginning, there was God's design. Thank you, and I'm about to do video 2. Thanks for being on this one. Thanks for getting it to the 20-minute mark.